Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 516. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. Now, those of you in the States, I want to wish you a very lovely Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope this will help get you through any travel plans you might have or some downtime by listening to some inspiring podcasts. Now, this week's episode, I think you're really going to enjoy and probably relate to because it's all about being overwhelmed and being overwhelmed. So I'm chatting with returning guest Christine Arylo about her new book, Overwhelmed and Over It. So you're going to learn why the first hour of the day is the most important, ways to release stress daily, and why work-life balance is the wrong equation. Now, if you haven't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode of Tranquility du Jour. And if you'd like the app so you can have Tranquility du Jour on your phone and at the ready at all times, plus all the back episodes going back to 2005, you can find that at kimberlywilson.com/podcast. Also, if you're new to Tranquility du Jour, a big welcome, and you can find out more about us over at kimberlywilson.com. My next offering is happening on New Year's Day. It's our New Year's virtual retreat, and it's from 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And during this time together, we'll be, of course, dreaming up what we want 2021 to look like, really focusing, of course, on what's within our control, and then also reflecting on 2020, creating a vision board or inspiration board, art journal, whatever kind of name makes the most sense to you or aligns with you most, doing a little bit of yoga, mindfulness, writing, reflecting, and communing. It's just a really sweet experience. I've been leading this for years now. And of course, the great thing is now with us going online, it just makes it easier for people to join. Like we have somebody from Alaska who'll be joining who probably was not going to be flying into Washington, D.C. for this event. So I hope you'll be able to join us, and you can find out more about that at kimberlywilson.com or in the show notes, kimberlywilson.com/516. One thing I know about you is that you love books. And I also know it can be tricky to find the time, which is why Audible is an excellent resource to listen anywhere from various devices, your iPhone, tablet, computer, and you can pick up wherever you left off. And I hope you'll be following along this month as we read Buy Yourself the Effing Lilies by Tara Schuster. And of course, you can pick this up on Audible with a free 30-day trial and get your first book for free. Just go to audibletrial.com/Tranquility du Jour. Happy reading. Christine Arylo, she's the author of Overwhelmed and Over It. As a transformational leadership advisor, 3-time best-selling author, and host of the popular Feminine Power Time podcast. She's recognized worldwide for her work helping women to make shift happen, and the lives they lead, the work they do, and the world they wish to create. Christine offers workshops globally and lives near Seattle. So you can find her online at christinearylo.com. Well, welcome back, Christine.
It's great to be here. We've known each other for quite some time.
I still giggle whenever I think about, I'm pretty sure it was your first book, the one with the yellow cover.
Yes, Choosing Me Before We.
Yes. And I remember, being asked to give a blurb for it and giving what I thought was like a really fun blurb. There it is.
You're on the cover. Yeah,
I'm on the cover. And I remember being like, I turned, as soon as I got a copy, I turned it over and I'm like, oh, they didn't use my blurb. And then I saw later it's on the effing cover. I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
I love it. It's a good one. A savory, sassy read for every woman seeking more than a fleeting fairy tale. It was perfect.
Love it. That's a lot of alliteration. Yeah. So, because that was, what was that?
2009.
Okay. Yeah. So we go back a bit. And so I'm thinking this is your third time on the show. Is that accurate?
It might be. Yeah, I think so. This is my fourth book. But I think it might be. I know I also came to one of your yoga studios, and remember we did a live event in DC, which was super fun. I think in like 2012, 13 was probably the last
Yes.
time I saw you in person. But I subscribe to your podcast, so I have like, I keep track of what's going on over there, and I have one of your books on my bookshelf, so I think of you often.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's such a great time to be connecting. And I have to say, big congrats on your new book, Overwhelmed and Over It. Embrace your power to stay centered and sustain in a chaotic world. And you know what I love about this, Christine, is I feel like, and I don't know if you relate to this, but say, back when we first connected and around that time frame, I mean, through now, but it's like hustle's the big thing, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
go, 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 go. And, with certain personalities, such as my own, that works really well, right? And so that's why I love that there's a book out there like this. It's like, yo, stop with the hustle. Let's slow it down. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to writing Overwhelmed and Over It?
I can. It's funny because it actually starts all the way back in 2009 when my first book came out, and it would have been probably after I was on this podcast, and I had been tirelessly promoting the book as one is told to do, hustling, right? At that time, flying around doing all these TV shows, radios, this and that, which of course looks glamorous, but is effing exhausting. And I had to pay for it. So I was working two jobs. I was at a consulting job, and I was growing my transformational coaching business. And it was August. I was in Dallas, Texas. I had just done an event with like two people at it and had been on some inane television show talking about Brad and Angeli's breakup. And and Noah, my partner, sends me this text of my dog, my house, my garden, and my beloved partner 2,500 miles away. And I'm in an air conditioned hotel room all by myself. So I had what I call my first superwoman sob. And I'm not sure, Kimberly, if you've ever had these or anyone else has had these, where like the pressure is so much and you're just tapped and the tears just come streaming out. Have you experienced?
Oh, yeah, quite often.
and and that led me to this like aha right there on the toilet seat. The lid was closed, you all. The lid was closed. And I had this aha, this epiphany of like, oh my God, everything I love is there. And I'm here by myself in a hotel room. And I've just designed a life that doesn't sustain me. I've just designed a life where I was chasing after what I thought I should do, hustling after success. And I'm an achiever, just like you. I love achieving things. But I realized that I had not been taught how to actually do things sustainably. I was just doing what everyone else around me was doing and what I was taught the model to success was. And it was so interesting because I had freed myself from my corporate career, which had proven unsustainable. And I thought, oh, well, I'm an entrepreneur now. And I'm like, it was worse. It was worse. And that kind of led me to these questions of like, how could it be after 60 years of being in the workforce as women, we haven't figured out work-life balance? How could it be that we've been told to do, be, and have it all, and it's not actually working? And we're super smart. We've tried everything. Something must be up. And that really opened up this portal that became like almost like research and experimentation to seek what was at the root of what was going on. And that was about 10 years ago. And that's what my purpose is to get to the root so we can stop treating the symptoms and acclimating into lifestyles and models for success that I don't think that ever had women or humans' best interests at heart.
Well, and that's what I love too. I mean, my second question that ties into this is work-life balance is the wrong equation, right? So I'm like, tell us more. So we're just fighting for this, like, okay, work-life balance. And, but it's is that really the answer? And I love what you said. It's like we're trying to fix the symptoms without actually going deeper.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. So if you look at that work-life balance, like you look at it as an equation, and you could even put your hands out in front of you and say, okay, I have work, on one side and I have life on the other. There's so many things wrong with this equation. So first of all, there's work and then there's life. So if you think about that, that means everything other than your work has to fit into life. So creative expression, parenting, beloved relationships, finances, health, like, all of it. And then everything else goes to work. So just think about that. Do I want a life in which there's just work and life? So there's that. And then also, if you put your hands out in front of you, this is like the best way I can illustrate it. In the book, there's a glyph because there's this glyph of a woman who literally has work on one side and she's holding a tug of rope, a tug of war, and she has life on the other side. And both are tugging at her, right? It's like, I'm working. I should be doing something over here with my relationships and my family, or taking better care of myself. And then if I'm taking care of myself or hanging out with my kids, I should be working. So there's this tug of war. And so work-life balance is what is called the duality reality, where you have two things that pull at each other. So think work, life, black, white, Republican, Democrat, profit, nonprofit. And it keeps you in this tug of war where it's always about, who's winning, who's losing. And it doesn't allow you to actually create a reality that is based in wholeness and wellness. And so so that's part of, first we have to release work-life balance as an imprint. And then there's so much more to say about it. I'll say one other thing. Balance is not a formula for how to organize your life. It's not. It's a way you want to feel. And Kimberly, you know this because you're a trained yogini, such as myself. We were just saying that God, thank God, we've been practicing yoga for so long, right? You want to feel balanced within yourself, emotionally balanced, mentally balanced, and have physical balanced. But the way you design and constellate your life is much more about harmony. And harmony is where like all of the parts, like a symphony, work together. And you don't play all the parts at the same time. They're not all playing at the same speed, but they work together. And you stand at the center as the conductor.
I love that. That's a really beautiful way to look at it, right? That trumpet is not going the whole time, you know?
No. Could you imagine if like you were the conductor of an orchestra and you made your trumpets play the whole time, or like the cello player, like they would just like, they couldn't breathe. They'd fall over. They'd quit. Like, we want to quit. I don't know. I don't, there's this little practice that I have that I do sometimes, which is empowering yourself to quit your life or quit your job. Like before, maybe if you can, before the Superwoman sob, or even like within it, of like, you just have to, sometimes you have to quit and be like, I quit. And you quit for like 24 hours, a weekend, to gain some perspective. And like, this is what I'm inviting women and really humans into, is to look around our lives and say, what is not sustainable? Like, what is not sustainable? To look at all aspects, look at your relationships, look at your work, look at your creative expression, look at your finances, look at your health, look at your home. I mean, there's 8 different realms of a whole life. And to look at all of those, my habits, my patterns, my practice, what's not sustainable any longer? And get real with yourself. And once you can start, the first step is self-awareness. Because you can't change what you can't see. And like that day on the toilet seat, that sounds so bad, doesn't it? That day on the toilet, the day in the hotel room in August. I'm like, couldn't I had the super and sub on a bed? No, I had to have it on a toilet seat. But I was like, this isn't sustainable. Working these 2 jobs to pay for all of this, like there's something wrong with this. And so thankfully this book, this 4th book, it's taken me 4 books to actually do it in a sustainable way. But I had to admit to myself that I had somehow said yes to it. And what I'm trying to help women understand is it's not our fault, you all, that we end up in unsustainable realities, because we've been imprinted by society, by our family, by our education system, by the hustle, situation. And so it's not about fault. It's actually not our fault. It's more about empowerment of like, when you can say, this is no longer sustainable. Mm-hmm. I say no more. That's why there's a big line on the cover, no more. And it's like the universe pays attention. It's like, hey, everybody, she's not kidding around. Like, we need to reconstellate. And I always say to women, you don't need to know how. You just have to be willing to take a stand for your own sustainability first. And then you get to work with the universe to make it happen.
I love that. And one of the things you talk about, and when we think about sustainability, I think about like kind of this our energy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in the book, you encourage readers to cultivate and retain their life force daily. So I'm curious, like, what are some tips that you would give our listeners? Okay, it's like, how do we get a more sustainable life? How do we cultivate and retain our life force daily?
I love being practical. It's like I love the big perspective and I love breaking it down. And I'm glad that you brought this part up because you can't even really truly like manifest in your full presence, in your full power, in your full purpose if you are operating at a gas tank and an energy tank that's constantly being depleted. Well, you can, but you're going to get sick. And that's what's happening to women all over. I mean, 1 in 3 women are dying of heart disease. That number used to be 1 in 4, and I don't think it's because of French fries. And so I think one of my most powerful practices, simple practices, I always say simple but significant, is what I call the daily bookend. And so it's how you start the first hour of your day determines how you're going to go through your day. And how you end the last hour of your day is a lot to do with how you wake up and where your life force is the next day. This is just straight up yogic science. I mean, it's yogic science applied and kind of married with a twist of feminine wisdom in there. And so the first step I always say to people is, well, if you don't have a consistent morning daily practice that connects you to yourself and to something greater than you and to the earth, you're going to end up like a windsock with no pole out there. If you're not setting your own magnetic field and protecting your energy field, and then you go on the Facebook, you go onto social media, you read the news, you just had like, come on, the whole world, anxiety, you just come on in. And then that exacerbates all your anxiety. And so, of course, you're going to end up overwhelmed. So the first step is getting clear on what you're putting into your field energetically, emotionally, mentally in the first hour. And if I always say, if it's not someone you live with and it doesn't create harmony, it doesn't come in that first hour. And then, of course, there's lots of practices that are founded in yogic science that even if you do bendy yoga and stretchy yoga every morning, it's not enough. Not right now. If you're not incorporating breath work and other things that actually strengthen that magnetic field, which is like the Earth's magnetic field. I'm seeing, people who've been doing yoga for 20 years completely bend it out and not in a good way. So I think it's like an embracing, Kimberly and everyone, we're in intense times, more intense than ever. So you want to strengthen those practices. And it doesn't mean you have to do an hour of yoga. It does mean you want to work with the practices that work the best and that you get really, I mean, how many of us, have you ever done this, Kimberly, picked up your phone before you brushed your teeth or peed or looked in the mirror? It's okay. I'm raising my hand. Everyone raise your hand.
Right. I'm nodding. Listeners, I'm nodding.
Right. And so what do you notice? I mean, even you know this, you're a trained yogi, a trained therapist, these, I know these, we all know this, but what do you notice for yourself when you let the outside world in that first hour versus when you have really connected on all these different levels? What do you notice?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're immediately pulled out of you, right? And you're pulled into what is needed of you, or even like you said, if it's news or even just social media, it's like, oh, that's what so-and-so's doing, or that's what, our president has just done, or, something. And it's just like, it's jarring, right? You don't have the ability to actually ground yourself. And I recently heard this idea of create before consuming content, this idea of like making sure that you're refilling your well before you're like consuming whatever else is out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And a lot of people, I think they think, oh, I have to do more. I think that's a big thing I'm trying to help people understand. It's like, not do more, do different, do it differently. And the same, even people who have a lot of people who have morning practices that first morning, and it's not the third hour of your morning. It is the first hour, just how it is. Sometimes I take a bath. This is also really a great thing during the week, having what I call a slow start day, where you don't just go right into everything. You allow yourself to like really nourish yourself. And I remember the first time I did this, my friend Shiloh, I was writing I went the last book and I called her on a Monday. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? She's like, I'm taking a bath. I'm like, what do you mean you're taking a bath? It's Monday. She's like, yeah. So I'm like, oh, revolutionary. You can take a bath on a Monday. And so, it's like I do that, or on Wednesdays are my space mornings where I don't schedule anything until like well after 11 o'clock. So I can wake up without having to think about anything. So like I wake up on a Wednesday and I'm like, oh, it's Wednesday, space morning. And all of a sudden I have space, that I'm creating that spaciousness. And I think the evening practice, again, these seem so simple, but they're so significant. And having that, if it's just you start that last hour, whatever you're putting in, if it doesn't sustain you, you're going to take it to bed with you. So if it's a scary movie, if it's, even Frankie and Grace or whatever your TV show, you've just invited Frankie and Grace or the people from Outlander into your, into your mind with you. And so you have to find other things. I always see you have to replace the draining thing with something that's actually sustaining.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the piece about that is you were saying like, oh, I didn't know you could take a bath on a Monday morning. I remember someone told me that they read in the morning, and it was the same thing. It's like, what do you mean you read in the morning? And I'm not talking news. I'm talking a book, like for pleasure. And that blew me away, as if that had never crossed my mind as possible. So I love what you're saying. I do think that's a really important piece. Now, how do you encourage readers to release stress daily, right? Because stress, I think for people, emotional stress, mental health stress, work stress, the harmony or balance of it all right now is off the charts for many people.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of your go-tos for stress reduction?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the imprints that I focus on in one of the chapters, which is instead of managing stress, choose to release stress. And this is again some really profound, simple yogic wisdom, and that science kind of caught up with sometime in the last century. There's I want to share this metaphor. It's a really good metaphor. Is that think of yourself like a dump truck. I got toilets and dump trucks going on. You're not the most beautiful. I know, Kimberly, you're all about the beauty, as am I. But we gotta just be real. This is not a beautiful dump truck. Although it can become a beautiful vessel. But most of us, we have like these trucks. I think of like a garbage truck, and it's like that's your stress. The yogis teach. You're not going to ever live stress-free. Living stress-free is a myth. The reason we do yoga is so that we can learn to stretch our bodies and learn the difference between stretch that supports us and stretches us. That's good, called eustress, and stress that is distressing and actually creates disease emotionally, mentally, physically. And so we have what's called an allostatic load, which is the amount of stress you carry in your body. Now, remember, yogis teach that there's more than a physical body. There's an emotional body, there's energy bodies, there's mental bodies, there's, 10 at least bodies. And so you're going through your day every day, taking up stress, like your own stress that comes in. And then you got, the person at the grocery line, or you got, the kid who's trying to figure out their homework or whatever. And that's all coming into your mental field, your psychic field, your emotional field, just depending on how you're designed. If you don't choose to release that stress in healthy ways every day and weekly, you will default to sabotaging ways. It's just what we do, right? So Kimberly, I'm not going to assume this for you. You tell me if this is true for you. I have self-sabotaging ways I release stress, and I know them. They're called brownies and red wine. And those are my two big ones, right? Like there's just sugars. Like give me something that is not work and feels sweet and nourishing. And there's nothing wrong with a brownie here and there, but when you're eating a pan every day, or you've just had your third glass of wine, for 3 days in a row, you're like, or it used to be for me, I would just start a second day of work at 8 o'clock and then, work till 11 or 12 or fall asleep in my work clothes, or fall asleep to Outlander and then wonder why I was having, scary dreams, at night, and waking up thinking about Claire and Jamie. So those are my self-sabotaging ones. And so it's like, I think it's really important for us to acknowledge these are the things we do when we sabotage. And we're not actually, because we just can't handle it. And then to not beat yourself up for it, because we all do it, to just be like, oh, get curious. Huh. And then get curious, what's going on in there? What's going on in my heart? What's going on emotionally? What's going on energetically? What's going on in me? And then ask the question, what do I need? This is where we get to the root, right? I can give you a whole list of things you could do. I'm sure, Kimberly, you have the things. I'm curious what you do at night to downshift, and I call it downshifting, downshift in a healthy way, in a sustaining way. But before you even get to that piece, is like, you got to know what you need in there. And that's the root, because you're self-sabotaging because there's something you're not getting that you need, or there's some way you have something, kind of energetically in you that you don't know how to release.
It's so funny when you said brownies, I was like, candy corn. I was thinking candy corn. It's the
candy
season.
Corn. Wow.
Oh man, it's bad. But yeah, I mean, I think, you're absolutely right. And finding those things that do help downshift you. I mean, for me, it's like hot baths, it's writing in my journal. It's, sitting on the couch with like a cup of tea and, watching Rachel Maddow, which is maybe not super downshifting, but, so, I mean, it's just interesting though, having those rituals, I think are a really important piece. And then to recognize, like asking yourself, like, is this serving me? Is it not? And no judgment, but making shifts as needed.
Yeah. And that's part of the great thing about, Rachel's Maddow is totally okay, just not the last hour before you go to sleep, because then Rachel's going to sleep with you. She's cool and all, but it's just like, then it gets in there. And so it's like for me, I will, I replaced the red wine with, I call it fairy cocktails. And it basically is bubbly water with fruit juice in it. And I just want to sit down with my partner, Noah, and sit outside and like downshift and not think about the world and all of the people that are in it or my work. I call it being human. And I have a Saturday Sabbath practice that I've practiced probably for 3 years. It's like every Saturday where I'm not allowed to think about anything. I can take care of, I'm not just sitting, going, but I can think of nothing of consequence. I'm not allowed to talk about things of consequence. I'm not allowed to plan things. And it just lets my whole mind, I'm putting my hand on my head. It just lets everything settle. No internet, no email. And I feel like that's one of the practices that is really saving me and has kept me stable, is having that space day. And it can feel like there's so much to do, I can't take it. And I can tell you there was a couple of times I didn't take it, especially getting through the book and all of that. And my partner Noah would tell you he liked me less on those weeks. I think I liked me less on those weeks too. And so if you don't have a weekly spacer and you're like, she's crazy, I can't start with a full day, start with a half a day. And just, that's where I started for like years before I graduated to the full day. And when you start to see and notice it, it's like, wow, like this really does work.
So powerful. Well, one of the things too that I'm curious about is you broke the book into 5 parts, right? And so I'd like to explore just a little bit of each. Liberate your success, your life force, your heart, your time, your power. So can you give us just a few tips maybe from each? So if we start with liberate your success.
Mm-hmm. So liberate your success, I would say the part that I said to look around your life at what is sustaining you and what's draining you. Or I would even say, when I do a lot of mentoring with women, I say what's in harmony and what's out of harmony. So really being honest about that. Part of liberating your success is, instead of take it all on and do and be and all have it all, the new imprint is choose what's right for you. And I think that with the pandemic, part of the gift and also part of the universal wake up call is like, hey, everybody, if this is out of alignment in your life, it's time to really look at it, get real about it, and then start opening up to making a change. And so I think that would be the first part of getting really real about the things that are not in harmony anymore. And so that you can start to get that and work that into alignment.
So that's success.
That is success.
And what about life force? And I know we've touched on that a little bit, but I'm just curious, whenever you think of liberating your life force.
So I want everyone just to close their eyes for a moment and just take a breath. And just bring all of your energy into yourself. And then imagine that this body of yours is like a chalice. And this chalice holds your life force. And when your life force is full, it's full, to the brim. It's like at 100%. Like if also it was like a battery of a cell phone, right? It's 100%. And then your reserves, if it kind of dips down into that, like the stem of a chalice, that's like 50%. And if it gets down to the base, that's like 25%. And so just do what's called the life force reading. So just imagine kind of sticking a very beautiful dipstick into your chalice and take a read of your life force on a scale of 0 to 100, the 100 being full, 0 empty, and 50 half. Where's your life force at right now? And whatever number comes, that's the number you want to start with. And if you haven't been speaking to your inner wisdom or your body lately, it might not answer. That's okay. Kimberly, what did you get?
50.
69 and a half. And so here's the scale. So this is about giving and receiving in harmony, which actually also is about liberating the heart. Is that part of why we get burned out, why we get overwhelmed, why we get sick, is that we over give, and we under receive, right? So we're like banks of like give, and then we try to receive, and then we're operating from the stem, or what would be our reserves. And the principle of feminine wisdom is never serve from your reserves, because once you start serving from your reserves, you're going to start to go, you're headed down the slope of, and so you want to, instead of drain your energy, you want to retain your energy. And so this reading, and I've done this every day, Kimberly, since I saw you last in Washington, DC. I created this practice. There's a second part then that will relate to the heart part every day since I've seen you, because I had to create this practice because I was in a burnout cycle where every 3 months I would hustle, hustle, and that's when my acupuncturist put his hands on my belly and said, Christine, retain. I was like, retain. Oh, right. Makes sense, right? Just like save your money, retain your life force. And so everyone close your eyes again. And it can help to put your hand on your heart, which might feel weird, but it's weird that it feels weird to put our hand on our heart because it's your heart, which is the source that knows what you need. And so just ask yourself this question: what do I need to receive today? What do I need to receive today? And whatever comes, you might hear something, you might feel something, you might just know something. It kind of just depends on how your intuition works. And if you haven't been speaking to your intuition lately, it might not answer. And so just make up something of like, oh, well, what will I love to receive? Like what would just feel really nourishing and nurturing? So Kimberly, what did you get?
Rest.
And I got receiving the joy of sisterhood. So it's never a 7-day trip to Tahiti. It's usually never even costs money, right? It's usually something you're already doing. And so this is how this works. You want to make sure you receive that. You design the rest of your day like that. Or if you're in an experience, like we're in an experience right now, I could go through this. She's like, check podcast, move on to my next call, check. But instead it's like, oh, right, I'm receiving sisterhood, right? It's not just like, oh, here's Kimberly, she's this nice podcaster lady. I'm like we have a relationship, even though we haven't talked, in forever. It can be like, hi, it's so good to see you, And so then you make sure that you receive that. And that is actually what fills up your life force. And then you want to be in relationship to your life force. So if you are checking in every day, you know where you're at. So Kimberly, you're at a 50. So here's how the scale works. If you're a 75 and above, and you give that day, but you don't take in a lot of, deposits, you're not going to go below your reserves, but it's still always better to receive. 50 and 75, you definitely need to receive so that you don't go. You're 50. When you're 50 or below, that means that you actually need to work differently and give differently and ask for support differently because you're headed into the danger zone, right? So what you do is you're just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna work differently. I'm gonna ask for more support. I might move some reflow. I call it reflowing some meetings to a different time. That's liberate your time. The superpower of the reflow of like, oh, I can just reflow that, not move it, not cancel it, not reschedule it. Just gonna reflow that, that project timeline or that thing I wanted to get done. I'm just gonna reflow it. And then all of a sudden now you have space, which you need to rest. And then you're going to fill up that chalice and then you'll have the energy to do whatever it is you thought you had to do today, but could really actually flow into a different space.
Beautiful. Thank you. I
I
think
think
that's
I
a
just
great.
did all three.
That's funny. Yeah.
All three in one.
You did. You did life force, heart, and time. Was there anything else with heart and time that you would like to share before we do power?
I think just that giving and receiving piece is really big. The in the process of my research, I identified 13 different kinds of ways we overgive. So there's overgiving, over caretaking, over promising, overextending. So really getting to the root of why you overgive, why you strive, drive, push, grind, over caretake. And in the book, I go over the 13 types. There's also a quiz that we just put out called Am I Overgiving? .com. So you can take the quiz there to kind of identify what those overs are. And one of the practices I do, Kimberly, and everyone for myself and the women that I work with every year in January during our visioning process, we do two things. So when you vision at the beginning of the year, we decide what our achievements and our goals are and what we want to do and achieve. And then the second question is, there's also then what's the support I need to receive to do that? So when you do your visioning, goal setting, make sure that, or you take on a project, that you always stop and pause and say, okay, what is the support I actually need emotionally, physically, mentally? There's 4 different realms of support. And then I also every year pick an over to transform. Went over and I focused on it the whole year. So this year was overextending for me, and which was perfect for the book release because there's lots of ways you can overextend time, money, resources. I mean, the publishing industry is like any other industry. It's like, you got to spend money to make money. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not really prescribing to that because I'm not going to go into life force debt, time debt, or money debt for this book. Not doing it. Done it. Not doing it. And so that overextending really supported me to actually challenge me to make my decisions differently. And then it brought up, of course, all these fears, and all this stuff. But I kept going back to like, no, I made this promise to myself. No overextending. I have to find a way that's in harmony, that's sustainable. And like we could have a whole other podcast on the miracles that have happened because of that and the different ways of working because I made that stake and I'm focused on it for the whole year.
Yeah, that's great. It's like word of the year and over of the year that you're going to shift.
Right?
What about liberating your power? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So, we have a power, a superpower. It's called harmonic defiance. And it is your power to make change happen in your life, in the organizations you live in your families, not by raging or railing or fighting, but by the choices you make in your daily life, by choosing to do things differently. Harmonic defiance, defying the systems that no longer work for you, whether you created them, whether they're in your family, whether they're in your organization, not asking for permission or having to even post about it on social networking. You just do it. You just do things differently. And that piece of liberating your power, I think there's a lot of things that we can feel like we can't change in this world. And there's so much more we can. And if you spend all your energy railing against or feeling like a victim for what you can't change, you're never going to create the world that you desire to live in. And in the book, there's a great piece of wisdom that was given to me by the daughter-in-law of Ann Richards, who's the former governor of Texas in the late 90s. And she started laughing because I just like imagine her saying this. Sharon, her daughter-in-law, said to me, she asked her one time, and how do you deal with all those brassy, men who think women should be in the kitchen or, whatever. And she goes, I just look around at them, and she's a Texas drawl, which I cannot do. I just look around at them and I just decide I'm not going to waste my chi on that. Not going to waste my chi on that. And I think right now in our current climate and what's going on, I see a lot of people wasting a lot of chi, a lot of life force, a lot of prana, and that's leaking your power. Like you're leaking your power. And so next time you can feel yourself like getting emotionally swirled up or in reactivity, like stop and hear Anne's words, like, do you really want to waste your chi on that? And then apply harmonic defiance, be like, what is my part to play here? What is my part to play? What's my part to play? And how can I make a difference? And then focus there. Think about if every woman on the planet did that. I think some of the stuff that goes on out there is just to keep all of us distracted from actually standing in our power and applying our power.
I love that. It's not worth my chi.
Right?
She's a feisty one. Yep. Miss Ann Richards. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, beautiful. No, I love these. And any final thoughts you'd like to share kind of about being overwhelmed and over it before I ask you my final question?
Just say to everybody, just reiterate that it isn't your fault. Like wherever you're at that's creating overwhelm or burnout or self-sacrifice, it's just, it's like, it's not about fault. If you could have done it differently, you would have done it differently. And it's like where you are right now, this is the part about power of like where I'm standing right now, what's needed now. And I can't promise you that you'll never feel overwhelmed, and no one could. But what I can promise you is that there is a way to gain both self-awareness and systemic awareness. So as the overwhelm shows up, you can actually make different decisions and make different choices for yourself and for your family and for the people that you influence. The truth is that when I got to the root of like one of the reasons we haven't been able to get out of these unsustainable realities is the systems that we've been living in for hundreds and maybe thousands of years are really built for burnout. I mean, think about it. They were created to fuel an industrial revolution, the age of information, and then the crazy tech boom that, moves on Google speed. And there's a reason all this stuff is crumbling, because what we need as a planet and as people isn't that. The grow, do, more. The planets isn't going to take it, which is why we see the fires and the floods and all of it. Mother Nature's like, humans, wake up, and, Gandhi said it. He said, be the change you wish to see. It's not a refrigerator magnet, right? It's a life directive. And so I really feel like each of us taking a stand to create a sustainable reality for ourselves in which success includes sustainability and us receiving what we need is a radical act. And if we do it, and like you do it, Kimberly, I do it, then the people that we influence and everyone listening, they start looking at you and they're like, you can do that? Because so many people, they're just like, they're little lemmings, we go along. And it's like, so we do it differently just by people watching us. They'll be like, oh, I can do it differently. And then all of a sudden, the world's different. And I think that that's the power that we have at this time, especially as women and beings, all humans. But yeah, that's what I would say. And I'm excited, and we're going to do it together. No more lone wolf, together.
Beautiful. Well, my last question for you, Christine, is the name of the podcast, of course, is Tranquility du Jour. And so how are you finding tranquility in your everyday right now?
Well, I'm really blessed. As you said, the question, I just looked up above my computer here from my studio in the podcast, and I showed it to Kimberly. One of the harmonic defiance moves was when I said yes to writing this book. I said, okay, you got to give me a house universe that's going to sustain me, so I don't have to leave to write. I can write from there. Be aware of what you ask for. And then the fires in California of 2017 happened, and half the quarter of the housing stock burned. And I had a choice: pay a lot more money to stay in California, or take a trip. And so we put all our stuff into storage, and we moved. We came up here not knowing we were going to stay, and I'm on an island just 6 miles off the coast of Seattle. And I'm looking out right now at the water and the trees, and I see the sunrise and the sunset. I see the moon rise and set almost every day while the eagles were out today. And so how I find it is really being in communion with nature. She has a cycle. It's cycle that how we're meant to work as humans. And so I find when I harmonize my life and I'm in harmony with those cycles, everything kind of works better and it feels better. I'm also been doing a lot of earthing, which is like, they have a name for it, like literally feet on the ground, no shoes, like connecting your electromagnetic field to the earth. I lay on the earth, and I'll just like put my face in the ground. And I have to tell you, like, I can be completely tweaked out and do that. And within 5 to 10 minutes, my whole system has recalibrated. So there is really something to it. And there's actually a movie about it called, I think it's called the Earthing movie or the Grounding movie, one of those. So those are earth earthing.
Beautiful. I
Being
love
connected
it.
to nature.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christine, and congrats again on this amazing new book. And thank you for the work that you put out into the world.
Yeah, it's so good to see you again. And thank you for this podcast, which has been going for quite a long time. And I know you create a place of harmony and beauty for people. So thank you for having me on, and thank you everyone for connected in today.
In the show notes, you'll find a link to find Christine on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and links to our previous podcast interviews. Also, be sure to join our Insiders Facebook group where we share resources, get inspiration, make connections, and be part of the online book club. So you can find out more information about that in the show notes, or just type in Tranquility du Jour Insiders Facebook group and you will find us in Facebook. Also, if you'd like to get weekly doses of love straight to your inbox, you can sign up for Love Notes where you get invites, inspiration, and much more. There's a link to my 6 books and planner, ways to follow along, Tranquility du Jour, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and a link to shop my seasonless, vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion line, TDJ. Finally, if you have a moment to share a review of this podcast, I would be so grateful, and there are links to do so in the show notes. Have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. And again, those of you stateside, happy Thanksgiving.